There are very few things that I dislike more than wasted potential, especially in situations where what we are looking at is so close to being perfect, but then gets fumbled at the end by a few unfortunate decisions. In this case, few really unfortunate decisions. Now I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. I liked Mavuika's character when she was introduced, and I made basically 2 videos praising her and talking about how she is a very pleasant character, really cool, very badass, and gave us a bunch of nice lore. But unfortunately I ended up being severely disappointed by how she was utilized towards the end of Natlan's Archon Quest series, especially during the Incandescent Ode of Resurrection, and most egregiously during her own story quest, but we will get to that. To put it as concisely as possible, Mavuika's biggest flaw is precisely the fact that she has no flaw. She is a badass perfect motorcycle goddess. But in pursuit of making her a badass perfect motorcycle goddess, HoYoverse essentially butcher other characters so that she can always be correct or always win. Now, on paper, when you look at Mavuika, she is supposed to be perfect, at least idealistically. Why? Because Mavuika is Natlan's Archon. She's a human that takes the responsibilities and role of a god. She is Natlan's son. Well, not literally, but metaphorically at least. If you go back to the fight against the Soithoth, she almost transforms into a son. However, that's besides the point. That's just imagery stuff. She should be perfect because she is a human that takes on the role of a god. The issue here is that so that she can be a perfect badass motorcycle goddess, as I said a few seconds earlier, this comes at the detriment of other characters. What makes this even worse is that she is not supposed to be perfect, apparently. And you know how I know that she is not supposed to be perfect? Because she says so herself. One of the very first things that Mavuika says, or at least makes blatantly clear when we first meet her, is that she is, at least according to her, and according to Waltikuten, as I'm about to say, she is no better or no different from the rest of her people, and her life is no more valuable than the rest of her people. This is why she gives up her power to the Sacred Flame, so that the flame can continue sustaining Natlan at the, I believe it was Act 2, after fighting Capitano. Now, Mavuika's own outlook on herself not being different from other humans is further reinforced by the angel Waltikuten, the Lord of the Night, who tells Mavuika verbatim that she sees Mavuika as no different from any other human in Natlan, and says that because of that, Mavuika alone should not bear the weight of Xabalanque's deal with Renova and the sacrifice and all of that stuff. The disconnect here is that Mavuika is better than basically everyone in Natlan. She is perfect. She is the most, ironically, the most godlike god that we have ever gotten, even though she is not really a god, she is a human who can grow old and die. The only other archon or deity that comes close to her in this regard is Morax's Zhongli. But even Zhongli has not only the age to support his near perfection, with age comes wisdom and experience and all of that stuff, but he is also more nuanced than Mavuika, where he is not just perfect for the sake of perfection. And you can see that when you go through his story. However, sticking with Mavuika so that we don't stray away from the topic, as you all know, she was a very highly anticipated character, because ever since Genshin Impact came out, everyone suspected, and many people like me almost knew, that the Pyro Archon was inevitably going to be a variation of Himeko Murata's character from Honkai Impact 3rd, or Gun Girl Z, or even The Legend of Saha if you go back far enough, all of that stuff. And Himeko Murata is a very beloved character. Unfortunately, Mavuika is Murata without any of Murata's flaws that made her lovable and likable from all the previous games. Now, just to be clear, I don't think Mavuika's character itself is bad. It's the main issue that I have is her utilization by the writers throughout the story, which you could argue this is the character because, again, Mavuika is not a real person, she's a fictional character that is being used by the writers, and if she is being used poorly, then that reflects on her character being bad. However, I make a bit of distinction between usage and the core character. So I think the core character is good, she's very pleasant, but the usage is atrocious. Here, let me show you what I mean. Let's go through it really quickly, right? I'm gonna keep it concise. After losing the ancient name Malipo to Burkina when they were kids, she essentially went to him and said, "No, I'm gonna go get an even better name than Malipo." And she does. She goes and gets Kiongozi, which is Xabalanque's ancient name, and she essentially supersedes Burkina's achievement, because why not? I mean, here's the thing. She got this through her own hard work with her blood, sweat, and tears, so we will let this one pass. However, keep it in mind, because it's not about the individual points, it's about all of them combined when you put them all into the framework of the whole picture I'm trying to paint, okay? So keep this point in mind, even though I would say that this is me a little bit stretching it, because yes, if she got it through her own hard work, it's justified. So let's go to the era of the Cataclysm. When that strikes, she goes to Tenok, who was exiled from his tribe, and she literally uses Talk no Jutsu on his ass. She says, "For Natlan!" And Tenok then goes, "Yeah, for Natlan! If you don't win, I'm gonna find a way to collect the debt," and whatnot. And then she goes to the 6 heroes, they all die. She conveniently is the only one who survives, but that makes sense because she is also the only one who is playable. She gets carried by Tupac to the Sacred Flame, and then Tupac dies. She offers her life to the Primal Fire, goes 500 years into the future, obliterates whoever was going to be an Archon at that point, and now, look, she is a perfect motorcycle goddess after Shilonen created her Flame Strider, which was her motorcycle. Now, conveniently, she also gets a whole-ass Descender on her side. To be fair, that's expected since the Descender is our playable character. We have to be somehow in the story. Then she defeats the first of the Fatui Harbingers in a fight for the Gnosis, offers her remaining power to the Primal Fire to sustain Natlan, so now she can't even have her cool burning hair, somehow gets her cool burning hair just a couple of hours later by sacrificing a bunch of antiques and mementos, has Chaska awaken her ancient name just in time for her to use Ronova's power and drive off Gusoithoth, which now means she must die as a price. After that, they do a 20-minute yapping session at the start of the Incandescent Ode of Resurrection to show us that Mavuika is not only a badass perfect motorcycle goddess, no, she is also very good at resource management and urban planning. I'm not really sure how that aligns because you need to study for these things. I suppose she studied these things when she was young. Now look, you can justify this if we go with the line of thought where Mavuika, she has the knowledge regarding urban planning and resource management and development and all of that stuff, since she used to help Hine, her little sister, learn architecture when they were kids. But that's a bit stretching it, however, we'll let this one pass. As I said here, it's not about the individual points on their own, it's about all of them put together. Here, you will see, let's continue. After that, Mavuika goes with the Traveler to defeat Gusoithoth, who took the form of Xicoatl. Although I'm gonna be honest, Ualtakutin carried their asses in that fight. Then when the time comes for her to pay the price of the deal that Xabalanque made with Renova 2000 years ago, the same guy whom she defeated for the Gnosis 3 quests earlier shows up and dies instead of her. 2 days ago, I made a video praising Capitano's death and talking about how this was a really well-written thing. Even though it had its own flaws, it was overall a good story and it made sense for Capitano to die, even if the death was not built up properly. Even though I liked Capitano's story individually, when you look at how it was used, you can see a really big problem. This death came about as a sacrifice where Thrain took Mavuika's place. And again, even though it makes sense for Thrain to do this, let's now take him out of the picture and look at what would have happened had he not been there. Mavuika dies. GG, it's over. Now let's go through this slowly. Why does Mavuika die? Mavuika dies because she used the power that Ronova granted to her based on a deal that Ronova made with Xabalanque, who is Mavuika's predecessor, at least in terms of Archonhood, where Renova would grant an Archon power, and that Archon would, at least supposedly, as Renova understood it, that Archon would die. So you have this perfect motorcycle goddess who is a human that had to make herself perfect, I suppose, if I have to be very generous with my phrasing, in order to step up and lead Natlan against the Abyss and be the leader of the deity of Natlan. Let's not reduce her position. When the time came for her to finally essentially pay the price for the risk she took, because she literally says this, a leader knows when to make hard decisions and risk-taking and all of that stuff. She made a risk, she made a very difficult decision where she would use Renova's power to defeat Gusoithoth, but then the price of this decision that she made would be her own death. When the time came for this perfect motorcycle goddess who gets everything correct to essentially take responsibility for her own decision, someone else comes and saves her. So convenient. Again, even though it makes sense for Capitano, the issue is not really with him, it's mainly with how his death was used to absolve Mavuika of all consequences to her actions. This is why I don't think Thrain's death should have been used this way to essentially save her. Because that was literally the only point where Mavuika would have lost something. She wouldn't have even lost because she completed all of her desires, she saved Natlan, she did everything, but it was the only time where she would have been held to some higher standard than herself, and when that time came, someone else comes and saves her. But to be fair, I understand where the writers were going with this. The death itself makes sense for Thrain, and if Mavuika was going to die and Thrain was going to die, and Thrain has his grudge against Ronova for cursing him and cursing his people and all of the suffering stuff, I suppose you can argue it and let it pass. What you can't argue, however, is what happens during Mavuika's story quest. Now look, when that story quest started, I was super hyped because Xbalanque was going to show up, and we have this legendary figure in Natlan, the first son, the first Archon, the guy who defeated Chiquotl, a literal hero from the Age of Legends. This guy was with Washaklahun Ubakan, this guy was with Natlan's very first heroes like Ochkan, like Lianka, like Ahpub and Ichkwe, and Malipo, not Malipo, Yupankui, the first holder of Malipo, the ancient name Malipo, which Kinich now has. Not one of the literal most legendary figure in all of Natlan was supposed to show up, but then look how he is treated in Mavuika's story quest. They spend the first 75% of the story quest glazing the living shit out of Xbalanque. And the reason they do it this way, you have to be very careful. Most players don't actually know who Xbalanque is. They probably heard his name once or twice. Most players are not familiar with the deep lore associated with Xbalanque from Genshin's books and world quests and all of the hidden lore about him. So in order to hype him up, they glaze the living shit out of him, and they bring essentially characters from every single tribe saying, "Oh my god, Lord Xbalanque is coming! Did you guys know that Lord Xbalanque was Natlan's first son, and he was the first owner of Kiongozi, the ancient name which means leader?" And you literally have everyone yapping about him. Oran, Sitlali, Chaska, you name it, every single character, in order to hype him up so that the average player knows who this Xbalanque guy is. And it's not for Xbalanque's own sake. This was done for Mavuika's sake. Why? Because when Xbalanque finally comes back, in the form of Masao, in the form of a little kid he possesses, they go and fight, and then Mavuika defeats him. And this was really the straw that broke the camel's back. I was fine with every single thing. I was fine with her, she should be intelligent because she is Natlan's leader. I was fine with her having knowledge on urban development, on resource management, all of that stuff, since she studied architecture with her little sister Hine, or at least taught her, or helped her study when they were kids. I was fine with her defeating Thrain, because although Thrain is the first of the Harbingers and by far the strongest Harbinger, she is still the Pyro Archon. In order to be the Pyro Archon, you need to be strong, and also she has the power of the Gnosis and she has the power of the throne. You can justify many of these things. Even when Thrain saved her ass when she was supposed to finally hold some accountability and responsibility, I was fine with that too, because at least even though I didn't like that he died to save her, or at least, no, I didn't like that his death was used to save her, I understand why he had to die at that point in the story, like it makes sense. Her defeating Xbalanque, that really sucked. Because they brought back a legendary figure from Natlan's history, the first Pyro Archon ever, the guy who killed Chiquotl, to glaze Mavuika for less than 1 day and then fuck off. That was his purpose. They hyped him up so that the average player knows who he is, and then Mavuika defeats him, and then he starts sucking her dick like Moalani. Her metaphorical dick, of course. She doesn't have one, but you know what I mean. And then he fucks off, he dies. Goes back to the Night Kingdom. Bro, that was so cringe. That was so cringe. And look, I know that he says he lost by the width of a hair, which means they were almost matched. He barely lost. She was able to get the upper hand. And many people will argue, I can already feel this, many people will go back to when Xabalanque told Dronova that over the ages, he himself, Xabalanque himself, expects future Archons to surpass him. He says that. Still, even though he says that, with all of the other stuff together, when you put them all together, when you see how Mavuika was literally perfect in every way, and when the time came for her to die, she gets saved by someone else. She is perfect in intelligence, perfect in strength, perfect in leadership. And when you put all of that together, and in the end you have her defeat Xabalanque, the very first Pyro Archon, in a fair battle, mind you, this was a fair battle. He was not nerfed. Many people are coping and saying that Xabalanque was nerfed, he was in a little kid's body. No, Xabalanque took her to his domain, the domain expansion thing, and in that domain, Xabalanque says verbatim that here, they can both go all out without the constraints of mortal flesh, which means neither she is nerfed, neither he is nerfed. Both are on equal terms, they fought, she won. And she won fair and square, by the way, which was a mistake. I don't think Mavuika should have won that fight. By the way, I do not think that it should have been a draw either. I think him losing in that specific moment ended up reducing his character more than it built up Mavuika. Mavuika didn't need any more build-up. She was literally already the perfect badass motorcycle goddess. You didn't really need to make her defeat the very first Pyro Archon after everything she did. Now look, I could go on and on. I don't really want to rant too much about this character. I was really disappointed because she was Himeko and I was really excited for her. When she defeated Xabalanque, I was like, yeah, I'm good, I'm not gonna pull for this character, I'm just gonna get Citlali and move on. I also don't really like her motorcycle, but I was going to overlook it because she is Himeko and Himeko is really cool in all of HoYoverse's other games. But then, yeah, the Xabalanque stuff happened, I was very disappointed. I suppose there are quite a few more things that I could say. Towards the end of her story quest, after she defeats Xabalanque and then he fucks off and we get back Mao Sao, there was another subplot in her story quest where they started doing the new Sacred Flame tournament thingy. And Kinich won that tournament, right? So they are having a whole festival or celebration of Kinich winning. And Mavuika comes out and says, guys, let's raise our cup. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along these lines. Let's raise our cups for the first ever winner of the new tournament of the Sacred Flame thing. Kinich! Now Kinich, get the fuck out of here. Guys, let's raise our cups for me! I defeated Xabalanque! Let's celebrate me! And then Kinich is on the side, but I won Archon. Me! Did you guys know that I defeated Xabalanque even though this party is about Kinich? Me! I defeated Xabalanque! That was so cringe! Man, like, this is essentially adding salt to the wound. This sucked so much. Ah, dude, what a shame. What a shame. Anyway, I actually liked Natlan's Archon quest overall. Mavuika was the only really big disappointing factor I had. The other stuff are just minor nitpicks. I wanted to get this video off of my chest because I was thinking about this character for a while. I decided, you know what, let me make it, let's not waste too much time on it because I have other really cool videos that I'm working on. I am working on a video about Kaya, Arlecchino, and Conria, and the Crimson Moon and all of that stuff. And there is another video about Hualtecuhtli and the Traveler and Ancient Names, and the Abyss Sibling. But of course, there is also Amphorius coming out in Honkai Star Rail very, very soon. I am going to really enjoy 3.0 in Honkai Star Rail, I can already tell. So, I'm gonna get back to doing all the other stuff that I have to do, including those 3 videos about Amphorius, Hualtecuhtli and the Traveler, and of course Kaya, Arlecchino and the Crimson Moon. Thanks for watching this rant, I suppose. It's not really a rant, I would say this is more of a criticism that I wanted to articulate for a while. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't think this is one of the situations where you will be able to change my mind. Not to that you can't disagree with me, of course you can, and obviously I could be wrong in many cases. However, this is a specific thing that I thought about for a while, and I am pretty 100% sure that I do not like Mavuika's character and how she was— well, no, her character is fine, I don't like how she was utilized. This is the important thing. Feel free to share what you guys think in the comments though. Thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you very soon in Amphorius.